Hi, my name's Dr. Rachel. I'm a naturopathic physician, but I'm acting as a health coach to virtually help people recover from COVID long haul, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, autoimmune conditions, and other chronic inflammatory symptoms or conditions. So I want to talk about COVID because I want everyone to know this about COVID long haul. There's just so much important information, so much that can be done, so many treatment options that I don't see being offered. And I just know so many people who have been affected by this. So I want to share some information about what contributes to COVID long haul, what are the root causes there, and then what can be done about it. So I'm actually going to share a PowerPoint that I presented in my 12-week Surviving to Thriving program. So I'm going to share my screen here. So before we start, I just want to give a disclaimer that this is educational. I'm not acting in the capacity of a doctor. Always seek the advice of your own healthcare provider before you start anything new or do any changes to your healthcare regimen. And obviously nothing I'm saying has been evaluated by the FDA. And please, if you distribute this to anyone else, just, keep this here so that my name stays on the presentation. Here's the full medical disclaimer if you'd like to read that. Okay, so when we talk about this virus, why did this turn into a pandemic? Why was it such a big thing? It is a cold virus. So other colds usually just attack and infiltrate in one way. So they really cause major damage with maybe one stealth mechanism or one activity that they do to get past our immune system. COVID does multiple things, and we call those virulence factors. So because it did multiple of them and it was new to our immune systems, we didn't already have any protection from past exposure. So that's why it was able to become such a large pandemic and why it affected health so severely. And then there's also what we're noticing about how people who already had diabetes or insulin resistance, their body already had more of a certain kind of receptor in the cell called ACE2 receptor. And COVID virus was able to use that receptor to really get in and attack more. And then it also further damaged insulin resistance. So there's a lot of people after having COVID that now have an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And that is because of the interaction with COVID and insulin resistance and how it affects these receptors. These are things that can be influenced. These are not things that are forever, that there's no hope of changing. So COVID has a lot of different immune system effects. How it manifests and what symptoms you have really depends on how it has affected your immune system. So in our lungs, we have a bunch of glutathione. This is an antioxidant that we naturally produce and we get from food. And it's a major detox support that our liver uses. But what an antioxidant is something that helps reduce and counter inflammation. So we need our inflammation to stay low, to feel good, but then we also need our inflammation to go high when it needs to, because inflammation is there on purpose. It's our body's defense mechanism against invading infections. So basically our body creates these inflammatory cannonballs that it throws at things. And our cells, kind of get the fallout of that and they get damaged too. So when COVID gets in the lungs, it starts causing inflammation of its own accord based on those virulence attack methods that it uses. But then also our body comes in and makes cytokines, the inflammatory cannonballs, and starts throwing them at COVID. And of course, it's not just going to end up touching the COVID virus, it's going to get our own cells as well. So what happens from all of this is that we get reduced levels of antioxidants. So we now don't have this chemical that was protecting our lungs from inflammation. So our lungs can end up, we can end up with shortness of breath, chronic cough, chest pain, a lot of signs, reduced air capacity in our lungs. And our lungs are really sensitive to things that come in and cause inflammation because our lungs have glutathione to protect themselves. And once that glutathione is gone, they don't have that much else protecting themselves. So our lungs are really rich in glutathione. And when the glutathione's gone, they really feel it. And COVID made the glutathione in our lungs disappear. So the other thing that we want to talk about here is the cytokine storm part. So when our immune system starts throwing these cannonballs, but our glutathione is already depleted from COVID being there, that's when we get acute respiratory distress. Our lungs can't protect themselves. They can't function. It's too much inflammation to function. There's also an immune system effect called CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And basically, once we start having inflammation in the body from COVID, we also have inflammation in the brain. And this actually causes our master hormone, which regulates so many things that keep us feeling good, to downregulate, to kind of shut down production. And then we're going to notice things like I'm getting sick all the time with the common cold or flu or whatever. I'm not sleeping well. I'm experiencing symptoms of low hormones, maybe lower mood, fatigue, lower libido, that kind of thing. And then also we are going to see more mood changes. So really low mood, anxiety, that kind of thing, leaky gut, so digestive issues, the list goes on and on. Our brain master hormone has a lot of trickle-down effects that affect systems all over our body. And COVID can trigger that chronic inflammatory response. Mast cell activation syndrome. So what that is our mast cells release those cannonballs to help put out inflammation, to help kill the bad invading things. But they can get too sensitive and they can keep releasing stuff even after the COVID trigger is gone. There's nothing shutting them off from releasing. We also get something called dysautonomia. This is when our heart rate is really fast. Maybe our blood pressure is going low. We're short of breath all of a sudden for no reason. COVID is pretty notorious for causing these because of the way that it goes in and affects our nervous system. So, our mast cells are going off, releasing all these cannonballs, and that'll cause things like we're going to feel really tired, have really crappy mood. Right after we eat, we're going to get a huge histamine rush and just feel exhausted and terrible, foggy headed, heavy, all of that after we eat. Maybe get new allergies that we didn't have before. That's all because of our mast cells. And then with the dysautonomia, which is like a POTS picture, if you're familiar with POTS, COVID really dysregulates the nervous system. And we see that in some heart changes. It's really common after COVID to have a faster beating heart. So those are signs that, yes, there is inflammation from COVID present. And then COVID does cause blood thickening. Inflammation causes our blood to get thicker. Earlier strains were more known for that than these more recent strains. But that's why we were seeing some clots as a problem after exposure to this COVID spike protein, is just because of the nature of our body responding to this infection and making our blood thicker. And then COVID, so this is whether you get the spike protein naturally or otherwise. Either way, it has molecular mimicry and it can cause autoimmune disease. So there's 30 self-proteins, proteins you have all over your body that COVID can cross-react with. And so that can cause an autoimmune reaction because our body is tagging COVID as it comes in and saying, invader, attack this. But then it comes across, a cell somewhere else in your body. And it's like, that looks a lot like the COVID I just tagged as an invader. And even though it's part of you, it's a close enough match that it starts attacking it. And that's really what happens in autoimmune conditions. So COVID can cause a lot of autoimmune conditions. Autoimmunity is kind of a general blanket that once it starts being turned on, there's different conditions that can come up based on, different genetic propensity and things like that. Sometimes post-COVID symptoms are more correlation than causation. So sometimes, the initial problem was COVID, but then actually now, months or years later, COVID maybe reactivated dormant monovirus that you didn't even know you had when you were like 18. And now that virus got to be reactivated, and it's causing fatigue and an inflammatory cycle and swollen lymph nodes and headaches and trouble focusing and brain fog, all of that. There's other infections like mycoplasma and Lyme. You know, our immune system is constantly keeping these things suppressed. We're not sterile. We don't live in a sterile world. So when something comes through that tanks our immune system, if our immune system isn't strong enough to keep all these past viruses or chronic infections dormant, they will come back up again. And it's really hard to tell what the symptoms are coming from because, long COVID, COVID that still has lingering effects that are not from these other infections. Epstein-Barr virus, which is the monovirus, and then these other infections, they all have really overlapping and similar symptoms, and they all cause the same inflammatory cascade in the body. And so basically we have this bucket overflow analogy. So if we think of the amount of inflammation and toxins and junk that our body is able to handle as a bucket, everyone has a different bucket. We're all born with different size buckets. Some people's buckets are able to empty out, drain out, detox at a faster rate than other people's. And so sometimes, this bucket was already full of a ton of other inflammation from other sources, and it was maybe 9/10 full. COVID came along. It was the last drop. The bucket started overflowing. Once the bucket overflows and our body can no longer contain that bucket of inflammation, that's when we start getting all these symptoms and we realize, oh, we're sick. But it could have been there before. It just wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back yet. So we weren't having symptoms. So a lot of times we have to go through and not just take care of whatever COVID caused, but what were the other things that filled up 9/10 of that bucket? It's not as simple as, oh, okay, I just need to find a medicine for COVID. It's what are the other things that made my bucket so full that my body couldn't handle, the amount of extra burden that COVID added to it. Stress, COVID is a huge stress trigger. The pandemic was extremely stressful. We saw a huge rise in things like low mood and anxiety. And part of that is because inflammation in the body causes inflammation in the brain, and brain inflammation makes us feel things like really like sadness, numbness, anxiety. But also it was just an inherently stressful situation. And what stress does is actually downregulate our immune system. So our immune system isn't able to work as hard. It's not able to fight off these infections. And so then if our immune system's not online, we're not going to be feeling good. Anything that touches us, we're going to get sick with. Stress is just a huge, huge player in a lot of things. And it's also a huge player in post-COVID autoimmune conditions. And then the isolation that came with the pandemic as well was also extremely stressful. So what has helped? Blocking inflammatory pathways in our body and replenishing those antioxidants, that glutathione, those anti-inflammatory protective measures that our lungs and other tissues in our body need. Glutathione itself. So glutathione is often taken as a liposomal oral supplement, a capsule, or nebulized, inhaled, made at a compounding pharmacy and inhaled into the lungs to help replete those glutathione levels in the lungs. Glutathione is also a little bit antiviral naturally in itself. It helps to thin and break up mucus. It has these two little groups in it that help do that. And then it also helps naturally dilate and open our lungs and get the blood flow where it needs to be to send the healing stuff. Naturally, as we age, our glutathione levels lower anyway. So that is also likely a part of why people who were older in age ended up being a little bit more affected by COVID. Our immune system also just weakens a little bit over time, but glutathione lowering, huge part. And I think why so many people who are probably over the age of 55, 60 are experiencing long COVID symptoms in greater severity. And you just have to remember too, we're talking about that inflammation bucket and all the junk our body has to deal with, all the cannonballs, all of the toxins we're exposed to, everything our body has to take care of and get rid of. And after a lifetime of toxins, our bucket's going to naturally be a little more full than maybe when we haven't been exposed yet to some of those toxins throughout our lifetime. There's also some other things, I've personally seen, I'm not saying that this has been researched yet, personally seen ozone IVs helping a lot of people, diet as a tool to help lower inflammation and replenish that glutathione. Vitamin D, we know that having low vitamin D actually increases the risk of COVID by 8 times. And ideal vitamin D levels, the lab will tell you 30 plus. In the functional realm, we say 50 to 90. I apologize, I need to plug in my computer here really fast. So in the functional realm, we're usually wanting vitamin D to be closer to that 90 range if possible. A lot of people in the US are low. Okay, managing inflammation is another huge way that we help manage post-COVID syndrome. So basically, there are 2 pathways that we've identified that are really helpful to focus on when it comes to COVID long haul. One, our body has an inflammatory pathway called NF-kappa beta. When we block this pathway using certain supplements, nutraceuticals, we help block that inflammation cascade, and then we get our glutathione production back. When we help stimulate our body's own anti-inflammatory pathway, there's a certain one called NRF2, which is found to be really helpful with recovering from post-COVID, because COVID downregulates this pathway, and that again lowers glutathione. So much referencing glutathione here. So then again, there are different supplements and herbs and things that we can use to help stimulate and get this pathway back on track. Okay, with ivermectin, I don't want to talk about this too much because it has become so politicized. But honestly, in health, nothing is black and white. Does ivermectin totally cure COVID? No. Is it potentially helpful when used as one of multiple agents? Yes. So research does show that ivermectin helps block viral replication and can decrease the amount of spike protein. That's shown in multiple research studies. Is it going to just totally cure COVID or totally prevent it? Unfortunately, no. And it absolutely needs to be dosed in a safe, appropriate way, and taken under the guidance of a provider. And then when we talk about breaking down the spike protein, so the spike protein is the main driver of this inflammatory process. The spike protein is sitting here on the outside of the viron. It looks like that little red raspberry. And the spike protein is in natural COVID that we get, just from exposure. And then also it's found in the immunizations because it's the most immunogenic part. It's the part that our immune system responds to the most. So this spike protein may be what's driving true long COVID. And I call it true just because I'm differentiating between that cause and correlation. So, for some people, it really is just the spike protein hanging around in the body is triggering this ongoing long COVID inflammatory response. For other people, the COVID part is long gone. It's really just that Epstein-Barr virus was reactivated, or other things were reactivated or allowed to come up, or autoimmunity developed. So when we're talking about the case of helping break down the spike protein, that can be helpful for helping stop molecular mimicry. The spike protein is what looks like a lot of parts of our body. So that's one of the things that our body develops an autoimmune tendency in response to. The spike protein can be broken down with fasting. So when we eat something, so imagine, we might eat like a hamburger, and this whole hamburger somehow gets completely broken down and assimilated and turned into our skin and our hair and our muscles. It takes an enormous amount of energy and resources on our body's part to digest, process, and assimilate our food. So when we give our body a break from having to spend all that energy on digestion, our body then has time to go through, can send out the garbage cleaners, and our little garbage cells can go through and eat up everything that they see the spike protein. They're like, hey, that's not part of us. That's not supposed to be here. And they eat it up. So autophagy is that process where our cells eat things. They eat up waste, anything that we don't want in our body. So that's why fasting can be so helpful. And fasting has been shown to help break down proteins like this in the body. Bromelain, which is a pineapple extract, and NAC and nattokinase, which is an enzyme, have all been shown to help break down the spike protein. I do educate on doses of these. I'm not going to put that in here just because I'm not quite sure what audience this is reaching, and there are contraindications and side effects and people who should not use these things. This is education. So please always consult with a provider before you start anything new. There are other supplements and medications that help. We've noticed people who are on statins are getting less effects from COVID, and saw that there were some protective anti-clotting mechanisms there in the statin. I talk a lot about low-dose naltrexone. It's a really nuanced medication. A lot of people need to start, at lower doses and work their way up. And there's this whole side effect that can happen from low-dose naltrexone, but most of the time it's actually meaning that it's working. So that's a really complicated subject, so I don't want to get into that too much here. But there are a lot of other supplements and medications that have been shown to help people who are suffering with long COVID. So here's some more resources. COVIDlonghaulers.com, they have a bunch of publications. Dr. Richard Horowitz, my mentor, he has an amazing site, cangetbetter.com. You can click on the COVID tab. And then there's the COVID critical care treatment protocols. I've seen those be beneficial for quite a number of people. And then what can you do at home even without buying anything or doing anything or starting anything? So meditation can raise our glutathione levels. Our body is amazing. We have more control than we think over some things. So meditating, getting ourselves in a rest and digest state can actually help our body produce more glutathione. It's crazy, 20% higher. That's significant. Exercise raises glutathione. Avoiding alcohol. Alcohol depletes glutathione because it goes in that bucket, and our body uses glutathione to help detox what's in that bucket. Eating nutritious and vitamin C rich foods can help boost our glutathione. And then this is just a little taste of more meditation, visualization side of things. But I think it's really interesting that nature has fractal geometry, which is division that happens in repetitive way that just keeps getting smaller and smaller as it branches out. Our lungs have the same fractal geometry as tree branches. It's super neat. So these repeating patterns, they have the same pattern on a small scale as if you step back and looked at the whole. Our blood vessels, our brain, everything divides into fractals. So our body mirrors nature in this way. I think it's super interesting. So here's a picture of our lungs just to see a little bit more about what the inside of our lungs actually looks like. All of these little alveoli and branchings need to be protected by glutathione. So our minds are more powerful than we know. And a lot of times we're talking about, a nervous system level. It's more subconscious. It's not even something that you're necessarily consciously aware of. But even just doing little things like visualizations that can help impact our physical body, because our mind and our body are super connected and they do influence each other. Research has found that visualization activates the same areas of the brain as actually doing the thing you're visualizing doing. So if you were visualizing an activity, you can actually get the same brain waves, heart rate changes, and other measurable body responses as if you were really doing that activity. It's really neat how powerful our minds are in influencing our body. So with the trees and the lungs here, we're just going to do a quick, maybe 3-minute meditation. I know it's really hard to jump into that kind of thing, and meditation sounds like a very intimidating term, but it doesn't have to be. Meditation is different for everyone. It's what you want it to be. It's any time that you just let yourself get in tune, connect your mind and your body. So really just getting in tune and really feeling into your body. And just giving yourself a chance to move into this rest and digest state instead of being in the I can do this, go, 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 get all these things done state that we spend so much of the day in. So go ahead, and if you feel like doing a little bit of meditation with me, go ahead and settle into your seat. I like to feel my butt pressing against the chair seat, my back against the back of the chair. I like to put both feet on the ground. It can be helpful to feel the soles of your feet touching the ground, really grounding. And then go ahead and put your hand on your belly. And we're going to take a deep breath in through your nose. And try to send that air down to your belly and fill up your belly like it's a balloon. If it's easier for you to gently close your eyes while you do this, I invite you to do that. And take another in breath through your nose. And fill your belly. And one more in breath through your nose, filling that belly area. And then make a big audible sigh. So you breathe that air and any extra tension in your neck and your shoulders, your back and your jaw and anywhere in your body out in that breath. And if you need to, do one more breath in and release all that tension out. And now I want you to imagine that the soles of your feet are touching directly on the soil outside. And tune in and notice how it feels to have your feet flat on the ground, that sensation on the bottom of your feet touching the ground. And imagine the soil feeling cool and smooth and soft but firm beneath your feet, as if you were sitting outside. And as you sit with your feet on the soil, you think of what's beneath the soil. You think of all of the tree roots around you, all of the trees in their various states. Some are huge, some are just starting. Think of all their different roots and how their different roots look for how big they are. And think of these roots branching out and reaching downward into the earth. And then think of your own feet, the bottom, the soles of your feet. Imagine you growing roots, just like these trees around you. Imagine these gentle, grounding roots slowly growing from the bottom of your feet down into the earth. And you notice that they mirror all the roots of the trees that are all around you. And keep growing your roots. They keep getting wider and branching out, reaching out toward the other tree roots. They keep going down even further toward the center of the earth. And now take a minute to feel these roots and feel them connecting and touching and reaching the roots of the trees all around you. And then bring your noticing from the tree roots around you. Pick one set of roots and travel up the trunk of that tree, up to the branches above. And zoom back and just look at this beautiful, branching, magnificent tree in front of you. And on your next in-breath through your nose, imagine your two lungs in your chest as trees that look just like that tree you're looking at. And as you breathe in this air and you exhale out carbon dioxide, the tree that you're standing next to looking at breathes in your carbon dioxide through its branches and exhales out oxygen, which you then breathe in. And you breathe out this nourishing carbon dioxide for the tree. And again, this tree takes in this carbon dioxide and exhales out oxygen for you. And take a moment to give some appreciation for this tree and all the trees around you, for the soil, for your roots that are grounding you in the earth, for your lungs that are helping you breathe and harness this life-giving oxygen. And we're going to start to come back into your body. So go ahead and wiggle your fingers and your toes. Take a deep breath in your nose. Feel the air filling your body. And do a big exhale and feel free to shake out any extra tension or do any movement that feels good. Keep wiggling your fingers and your toes as you gently blink your eyes open. And so I love leading meditations and visualizations. That was a faster, a little bit sped up version, but just a taste. And I love intertwining the trees with our lungs and how that connects back to this topic about, COVID and supporting our lungs. So just remember, when it comes to long COVID, it's all about supporting and nourishing the body, and going through and doing everything we need to do to help empty that bucket. It's a lot more than just going after the original COVID. So if this is something that interests you to learn more about, please reach out to me. You can message me on social media or book a call with me, whatever. Happy to chat with you more about it. And I hope that this was helpful. I think this is information that needs to be out there. So wishing you all the healing, and maybe I will hear from you in the future.